It's my utmost pleasure to introduce you to our panelists. Acharya is Assistant Professor in the Department of English, University of Science and Technology, Meghalaya. He's interested in poetry and translations, and his published works include No Matter, a sci-fi novel co-translated from the Assamese with Joy Das. He lives in Guwahati, Assam. Praveena Shivram is an independent writer based in Madras. Over the past 18 years, she has been a journalist and editor of national publications, has scripted documentaries, written fiction for screen, reviewed books, authored personal essays, and has had her short stories widely published. She also teaches creative writing for children and adults. Her debut book is soon to be published by Zuban. Pooja Ugrani is an architect, teacher, and poet from Bangalore. She graduated from the Sir J.J. College of Architecture, Mumbai, and has pursued research on human expression at urban boundaries in community living. Her poetry has been published by the Café de Senses every day, the RIC Journal, and in the Kali Project Anthology. She is read at the Bangalore Poetry Festival 2019 and the Bangalore International Center. She spends her time writing about the small everyday things in life that intrigue and engage her. Amlanjyoti Goswami's new book of poetry is Vital Signs, published by Poetrywala. His earlier collection, River Wedding, was widely reviewed. His poems have been published in journals and anthologies around the world, including Poetry, The Poetry Review, Penguin Vintage, Sahitya Akademi, and Rattle. A Best of the Net and Pushcart nominee, his poems have also appeared on street walls in Christchurch, exhibitions in Johannesburg, an e-gallery in Brighton, and buses in Philadelphia. He has reviewed poetry for Modern Poetry in Translation and has read in various places, including New York, Delhi, and Boston. He grew up in Guwahati and lives in Delhi. So please welcome them, and I hand over to you.
Thank you, Lubna, for that. I know she said we're going to discuss many things. I don't know if we're going to do all of that. Hopefully, we'll get there. So, welcome to this. First of all, Amlan, congratulations. It's no mean feat to have 2 books of poetry out. And I feel especially honored that I had the opportunity to read his first book of poetry, River Wedding, and now Vital Signs. And I just wanted to actually just start off by the difference is very stark for me when I look at River Wedding and Vital Signs. And I feel like Vital Signs, all of the poems are almost as if different Amlans have written them, right? It feels like you've inhabited different personas because no 2 poems are similar. There is a difference in form, there's a difference in structure, there's a difference in even how you're processing ideas. And I thought that was really interesting, and I wanted to know if that was a deliberate attempt or if it was something that just happened unconsciously, and how much of you did you see in this?
Thanks. Yeah, before I answer your very complicated question, thank you everybody for making it today. It's a moment of celebration for me, and I'm very glad that I'm here and you are here to share it with me. I think so. And it's not easy to listen to poetry and listen to things about poetry on a Sunday evening. So there are many other commitments on your time, and I'm glad that you chose this over all else. Also thankful to the panelists. Looks like we know each other for a long time, yeah? But we have met only a few times. So I think it's very nice to see the bonding. This complicated question about self, and see, people who know me for a while, I think are familiar with the fact that I wear various hats during the course of a day and week. So people who know me in IHS, they don't know me as a poet at all. So they know me as various other things in IHS. So at some point, I guess, in life, I stopped asking this question of who am I? And it was a very liberating moment for me. Because who am I means you're this, but not that, neti, etc., etc. So I thought that, you only have one life, you've got to do what you have to do. and there's only so much time, and time runs out anyway. So stop asking questions from the point of view of how other people perceive you, and instead just do your thing. And I had a passion for poetry for a while. So in that sense, this question of, you could say, post-identity, so to speak, that there is not one self as a person in me at the first place, I think that's very clear. And I like this idea of one persona playing with another. I'm not the first. If you see Fernando Pessoa, for example, Pessoa uses these things called, he calls them heteronyms. These heteronyms are not, they're distinct personalities in themselves. And at least 4 such heteronyms are actually world famous poets in themselves. They're all Pessoa, but they're, so you have Alberto Cairo, you have Alvaro Campos, you have Ricardo Reyes. These are all Pessoa, but they are different poets, they have their own style. They even fight in real life over girlfriends. Yeah, so it's a complete, and that's Pessoa's nature of Pessoa's universe. Of course, I'm nowhere near that in reality or elsewhere. So as far as this question about this book occupying multiple, it's like many poets writing it. I think once the first book was out of the way, it's the first book has to be out of the way fast. It took a long time for me. I've been writing for about 20 years, and there was no book anywhere in the horizon. Now in 3 years, I have 2 books. So it's one of those things about luck and fate and whatnot. So once the first book is out of the way, that beast is off your kind of shoulder, and you've talked about your childhood and whatnot. So it's gone, it's done, it's out there. I think it's a great relieving moment at that time. And once you have a certain comfort with form, with language, and you see the immense possibilities that are there in poetry, which unfortunately are not very well publicized. I think a combination of the fact that the various personas don't trouble me, A, and B, the fact that I had reasonable confidence in the form to be able to play around with all kinds of possibilities in poetry without necessarily being derivative. Yeah. So in that sense, it's a kind of coming on one's own, so to speak, in an ironical kind of way, where now I'm very confident about my form and what I can do with it. That's a long story short, I guess. Yeah.
It's very interesting that Amlan said he stopped asking the question, who am I? Which is the exact opposite for me. I feel like every time I write, I'm like, who am I? Like, what am I writing? Like, who is this person? I feel like I grapple with that question a lot with anything that I write. And I also find that I grapple with that question even when I read something. So it's almost like in recognizing the other person, I get a better sense of who I am and what my process as a writer is. So it's interesting for me that it's diametrically opposite to what you just said. But I also wanted to open it out to Ra and Pooja, because you both also write. And there is this sense of, I mean, it's all, everybody thinks whatever you write is from your own life, and you know how much of it is true, how much of it is not. There's always this this idea of, am I surrendering to what I'm writing, or am I staying above it and writing? So there's a lot that happens with who we are as people, and what are the words that are coming out on paper. So just wanted to see how you sort of perceive this space.
Hello. Yeah. So for me, it's always, I think I'm still in that, I mean, I still don't have my first book out. So I'm still fighting with the beast and talking to my childhood right now and all of that. So I think when you go beyond being an exhibitionist, that is when, the real thing, I mean, I'm still grappling with that, but the first instinct for me right now is to put it all out there and know me for what I am right now. But then there's also this element of, no, it doesn't really, strike as very interesting. Can I kind of make a little twerk here, a little twerk there? And it kind of reads better in this context, that kind of a thing. But it begins with being an exhibitionist. And then from there, I'm kind of, I may sound crude here, but that's where I come from, that I first want to put my story out there. But then in my editing sessions, I kind of tweak it a little here and there to kind of make it more contextual too.
Yeah, so I haven't really done much writing. I have written a few solicited manuscripts at best, never anything of my own accord. But I translate a lot. So I think for me, this question is a little easier to tackle, perhaps because there's always this distance. I'm always dealing with somebody else's work and trying to recreate it in a foreign tongue, perhaps. So this distance allows me to have a good sense of myself also. And even with translation, I believe earlier it was about the invisibility of the translator and how this work should read as if it is original in the target language. But nowadays, with translation theories and everything, I think the translator also needs to be visible, because this is my translated work. I mean, if someone else did it, it would be a little different. So yeah, with that, I think I have a sense of who I am, especially because of this distance that I can maintain with the text that I'm dealing with.
The other thing is, I think it's good to not get the goodies too early in life. So good to lose hair and, see a bit of life. When he said, coming on one's own and getting to know oneself, I think, I read Gabriel Garcia Marquez once said that the luckiest thing that happened to him was that he didn't get anything published till he was 40. And he went through all kinds of very difficult circumstances in life. So maybe that question of the self not being so important anymore, because there's so much else out there. Yeah, why bother about oneself so much?
That gives me hope, thank you, because my book is coming out only this year. But also in this context, I really wanted, there was one poem in the book. We are allowed to read from the book, right? Even though we have not opened the magic packets. We are, right? Yeah, we have them here. So if it would be great actually if you would read the Evening in Yale, because it sort of really talks about what we've already been talking about.
Hello. I prefer to read standing, so yeah. I'll give you a little context on this. This conversation is turning out to be a kind of coming of age, Bildungsroman kind of conversation. Maybe this will be the end of that conversation. So this is a poem called An Evening in Yale. I wrote this poem many, many years later, maybe about 15 years later after it happened. It has an autobiographical element to it. It is confessional. In the sense it happened to me. So I think poets should get out of looking beyond their noses and toes. But at that time, since this is something, a recounting of sorts, this is a phase in my life where I was kind of lost, to be very honest. I was at Yale, just come out. I wasn't sure about being in America. I didn't like it there. I wanted to be back home, but there was nothing at home, and so on and so forth. IIH has been very good to me. People know that. So I found my feet here. So this is a time in my life when I'm moving from a table tennis hall to a cemetery to ambling around, watching a concert, to entering a bookstore and seeing what's going on, like some guy who's just totally not very sure of what's there. So there's a story later which I'll come to later. So this is called An Evening in Yale. As I stepped out of the cemetery, the fork in the road, one leading to law school, other to the place where nothing really happens, I chose the latter, my feet, not my mind, leading me to a bookstore where wine was placed on dainty little tables and a few books on display and empty chairs waiting for poetry lovers. I preferred standing, as she began in a soft voice, very polite, very warm, something from a book in her hands. I keened my ears for an answer to the questions that bothered me, hoping epiphany would reveal itself in the shadows of that room and I would find a way to light up that dark. That revelation would wait for me as a vagabond in the corner, railing against war, holding a cup for a coin. No such thing happened. I liked her voice, how she came across, the answers to the questions asked, but nothing touched me. So this is how it is, I thought. when I saw wine glasses clinking, soft evening laughter, white jokes a universe away. I carried no line with me as I stepped out, wondering how to read and why. I asked for my place at the Chinese takeaway next door, where they served a hot bowl of soup for $1. I even got to talk to the waiters. They knew me and asked me to tip separately, not as part of the bill. I looked on through glass as the sun set, remembered darkling thrush, thinking, what happens next? The soup swirled my future, uneven, looking more and more distant as it left the room. I wondered if I should have bought the book of poems, but I knew I didn't for a reason. She may have been a good person to talk to, but I had already chosen coffee. The story is, I wrote this in 2019 when someone told me Louis Gluck had won the Nobel Prize. So this was the poet I was listening to.
So the reason I picked, we talked about this, is also this sense of self is actually it's a very, how do I say it? It's not reliable, right? We can't say, oh, I've discovered it, and that's it. It keeps changing, it keeps shifting and evolving. And I think there are a lot of influences that come to sort of define what the sense of self is. And also the influences vary from place, from space, from language, culture. There's so much that informs what this sense of self is. And this question of who am I as a writer, and what it is that I'm writing, what are the words that are coming, and what is the space it sort of takes out in the world, right? I've put it out on paper, and then it's gone. And then I don't know what kind of space it's going to take out in the world. So I feel like there are a lot of influences that define what the sense of self is. And even for me, I sometimes feel I'm living a very schizophrenic life, because the world of characters that are constantly with me are also me and not me. When I'm writing, it's also mine and not mine. So there's always this dichotomy, this paradox. You're living in a paradox all the time, right? And this is why I find this question of sense of self, who am I, very interesting, because so many influences come our way. So I just wanted to understand, like, what are the things that you think influence, or you think make or define what the sense of self is, and how that sort of translates on paper.
I'm just kind of trying to say that instead of pathologizing it as something that, call it whatever, whatever label you give it to, I think that living in pluralities, immensities, living in dissonance, things falling through the cracks, things not being in sync, is a great thing. Why not take advantage of it? And I think the creative pursuit is just about that. Because if everything was all nice and all these like 3 days of conversation, even on a literary kind of literary fest like Cityscapes, not a policy discussion, we know that finally everybody is saying that it's not too good. I mean everybody's struggling. It's a difficult time. We want to do better things, but what is better? So these conversations are there. My point is that for creative people, dissonance is a great thing to be taken advantage of. Make it art. Because if life was also smooth, which it anyway isn't, but if it was also smooth, then nothing will come out of it, and least of all art. So influences, you mean artistic influences, or generally,
I feel like it's hard to define, it's hard to separate the two. I think
life is the greatest influence.
Yeah, it's many things, it's everything.
Yeah, 2 days ago, there was this, yesterday, there was, I don't know who, this climate fiction story, there was a session on climate fiction. I felt that the event for me, I was sitting here with my daughter, and the event for me was not what was going on here, which was, of course, was going on. It was the event. But the poetic event, or a creative artistic event, or the sense of dissonance, was when I saw that moth going up there, and it went and it landed on that speaker, and then it flew, and then it vibrated, went there, and then some heads turned. That is that moment. That is a poetic event. And I'm not saying that you can create a poem the next day. You can't. But that is a moment of alterity, a moment of something didn't fit in, but at the same time it did something. And I think as long as we are alive to that, instead of shutting it down, the world is telling us to shut it down. The world is telling us to move in typical ways. The world is telling us to go in Google Maps. The world is telling us to be efficient and reach the shortest point of the destination.
Least discomfort.
Least discomfort, least resistance. But at the end of the day, I think there's something very human in us, which is about feelings, which is about things which need to come out. It didn't come out in poetry. It can come out in cooking. It can come out in football. It can come out in any number of ways. But it needs to come out. If it doesn't, then I think that is a pathology. Not coming out is a pathology. But using a dissonant to kind of do stuff around it, I think that's the business of art.
I'm a big fan of these, wearing multiple hats. I think it helps a lot. It feeds into each other. Like if you are at any given point of time doing 5 things, it will start feeding into each other. Also, I don't know, this is a personal preference, but I like to be surrounded by non-poets. It's always nice to not be in those circles. Like I've had best friends who will just say, "Paka mat," I mean, like just stay off, don't give me more literature, kind of a thing. So it's nice to be in those kinds of circles as well, because what happens is we sometimes like fall into echo chambers. We sometimes start looking at ourselves very seriously, and then you stop engaging with everyday life. You stop looking at it from a different perspective. So it always helps to kind of wear multiple hats, and then you can just like probably walk with somebody and talk about how your day was today, or do something completely different. Like I'll sit and knit somewhere probably. And I mean, and those could be the magical moments. Those could be the moments that, then later on feed into what you write. But it's nice to be kind of mixed and matched like a mosaic with many other kinds of people who don't agree with you at all.
I'm so glad for both economic and other reasons that I don't make a living from poetry, nor do I have to frequent poetry circles and kind of cultivate people to be a good, quote-unquote good poet or be in anthologies and so on. Wherever I've been, people have published me, they don't know me from Adam. They've never seen my face, nothing. But to forget my own, but this point of I feel that there is a moment now in poetry where you can create stuff from very ordinary, quote-unquote unpoetic subjects. I think there's a great moment now, and thankfully, maybe because we frequent other worlds, which are supposedly unromantic, very tangible, mundane, dry, whatnot. Yeah, boring. Yeah, so supposedly, I think there's a lot of great material which has to be mined and which can be done very good things about. And see, this stuff is also a little, the poetic thing is, why is it different from a prose or essay or fiction, non-fiction or whatever? Is because there is a sense of, how do I say this? A pre-lingual sense of thing. It is as altered, there's this augmented reality going on upstairs. It is a slightly altered sense of cognition. You can't simply just say, I'll write a poem and it'll kind of come out. So it's an altered sense, but that altered sense of cognition with a subject which is very mundane, I think creates possibilities. Now, nobody is saying, I wandered lonely as a cloud. Yeah, I wonder sometimes, why are clouds lonely? I thought in Bangalore, clouds are there in flocks. Yeah, yeah, but I wandered lonely as a cloud. Yeah, we were learning, I mean, I was from Guwahati, we were all learning about daffodils, but nobody looked at the Rajnigandha across the street. Yeah, so I feel that, this also, I feel the way we've been taught poetry, the way we've been taught to look at this whole idea that this poet is this lost character in the mountains and is levitating, yeah. I don't come from that kind of view, which is, I feel that grow your roots, deepen your roots, and then don't be so Kupamundaka that, your roots are that, you can't even look outside. But I think there is that moment in Indian poetry, certainly. And Arun Kolatkar started this. So, Ra, what do you think?
Absolutely.
I'll take a few seconds, actually.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree with this. Poetry has been built to be something that common people are not supposed to appreciate or understand at all. But exactly to that point, I think it's about finding poetry in common things, in common places, and making something out of it. You mine those experiences which are absolutely unpoetic, perhaps, but you use them and you perhaps internalize all of these things, and one day it'll just come out. And also to your point about influences, you saying that life is the greatest influences, I absolutely agree with that, because, and also I like the fact that the book is divided into sections, and the first part is called life, and then followed by belief and fellowship. And I think these things are very important, and maybe not in the same order, because I think what the poet here is doing is that his fellowship with things, trees, birds, for example, is what invests his life with meaning and belief that, this is something worthwhile. This is something that is worthy of being celebrated, perhaps. Yeah.
And I actually want to go back to that point of dissonance that you made, because I think even that is a very subjective way of looking at things, right? What is dissonant for me will not be the same that's dissonant for you. And that also sort of feeds into perspectives and how I see things and why certain things are standing out for me and why certain things are not, which is also the wonderful exhibition that's there outside, where the photographer has really captured a kind of dissonance, right? Which his eye was seeing, and so therefore we also see it now. And then there is a relatability that comes from it, and then like, oh yeah, I've also seen this, and oh yeah, I saw the nest there, and I've also had this experience, and it comes from there. But this idea of dissonance itself, and to sort of stay in that space, like you very rightly said, and to be in that space of discomfort, I think it's becoming more and more significant and urgent in the world that we're living in, because we are completely doing away with discomfort, we're doing away with dissonance. We don't want anything that is making us uncomfortable anymore. We don't want to sit through something that is making us uncomfortable. We don't want to be in that space, right? And I feel like this is probably also a kind of responsibility of the writer, the poet, to bring that kind of discomfort and be okay with it. Sometimes when we're writing, we think, oh, nobody's going to get this, or nobody's going to really understand what I'm trying to say. But then to just also be okay with that is also a kind of dissonance. So how do you
It's
sort
a way
of
to also
navigate that
pause
space?
pause time, no? Because we're also busy, so we have to pause time a little to even understand that there is a dissonance here. There's a frisson here, which is so. But yeah.
Tightrope, no? I mean, like,
it is a
where do
tightrope.
you kind of draw that line? Where do you connect and where do you kind of withdraw?
And also, it's a craft at the end of the day. So there are tricks of the trade. Yeah. So, and the tricks of the trade you learn, the more you read, the better you get. So, there is a moment when initially you have this, what you call juvenilia, which you want to just keep writing, and then you feel so embarrassed about the stuff that you wrote many years ago, yeah? So, and then but you have to get over that stage. So this craft you pick up craft also from deep immersion in practice, in whether it's life experience, but also in reading of craft, like everything. To be a good painter, you have to know what, so you also to transcend styles, do stuff around it, you have to know what the styles are. So there is no substitute to immersion, and you can only immerse yourself if you're interested in it at the end of the day. It's, but does it do something to you? That's the only thing I keep saying, people say, oh, you do write for yourself or the reader. No, it's a bit of mix of everything, it's a mix of everything. What does it's not meant to make the reader feel, that the reader feels something. It's whether, I no longer ask this question of what did this mean? What does this mean? I don't know what it means. Yeah, it means various things to various people. But and also the same poem means various things to me. People relate to it differently in different ways. But if it did that little thing of, okay, did something, I think that's good enough. It's reward enough for a poet, frankly. Yeah.
And also the point of the fact that when we are writing, we're only one half of that process, right? The other half has to come from the reader. The involvement has to come from there to finish that, to complete that circle, really. And this is also something that I often think about, is how involved are readers today, and what is the fabric that's shifting in how we are processing information, in how we are consuming information, because we are consuming stuff all the time, right? All day we are consuming information. So what kind of difference does that make to how something is being read? Not that it should impact how you write, because what you write, how you write is still your own. I'm not asking it in that context, but just, is it something that you wonder about?
See, you become a reader after you've read the poem. What I do is I marinate the poem. So everything written is marinated, it's kept somewhere. And then I come back to it, this time as a reader. And when I come back at a reader, half of me is also a critic. So I'm my worst critic myself. So then you realize, oh, so much to cut, so much to edit, so all of that. So then you're using your reader, another self, so to speak, a cognitive self, which is different from the one who wrote it. Now, if you suppress the original creative self, then nothing will happen. Nothing will come out. The fact that you allow the first creative thing to happen, sometimes the first cut is great, but I envy such people who can really cut it off at the first. I increasingly now, as I'm growing older, my first cut is never the best cut, unfortunately. But when I was younger, my first cut was good, yeah. But now it's not like that. So I need some time to digest. So, where was I? I forgot. What was your question?
On whether you wonder about this quality of reading that has changed.
Oh, okay. No, see, I'm not a believer in authenticity. So the minute I dump authenticity out of the window, I don't look for an authentic reading or writing experience. I don't look for, oh, this is really true. Oh, this is the real thing. Yeah, I'm looking for a plurality of experience and of writing. So in that sense, my plurality of poetry should, and frankly, poetry has been too long shut inside textbooks and cabals and so on. It needs to open up. And I feel that, though I'm not one of those, I feel that spoken word poetry has as much a place in the poetic universe as, books written like whatever, So the idea that spoken word is not authentic, quote unquote, it's something else and this is authentic and that, I think that needs to be thrown out of the window. There are different types of poetic universes. Anyway, it's a small world. Now let's welcome everybody. England had the same problem. The establishment refused to acknowledge spoken word for the longest time. Then you realize the best stuff is coming out from there. The colored stuff, the mixed stuff, all the kind of, which was all shut out of the gallery and of the establishment, came out from spoken word. And now those spoken word artists, like I can think of so many, yeah? Roger Robinson, yeah? Who won the T.S. Eliot in 2019. He started out with, he was entirely a spoken word artist. So I feel that there's a moment, India is a country with so many languages, so many experiences, it's so unbelievably crazy and nice. With all our problems also, it's so unbelievably crazy. So so why not open the poetic canvas as well? So the answer to your question is, because I don't believe in authenticity as a credo, I feel that I'm better able to beg, borrow, and steal. Yeah, if that's
would you, direct question, if vital signs, or I don't know if it is already an e-book, do you think the person who's reading it, have you imagined the experience that somebody goes through when they read a physical book versus, say, something which is this big, and then you start scrolling through and you read? Will there be a change in experience? Have you given it a thought about?
I have. Writing on A4 has a certain, it's happened to me as well. I know when an A4 page ends. I'm sure somebody writing in longhand in the 90s or 80s would not have that same sense of, maybe better off, maybe worse off, I don't know. But if you ask me, I have a sense of the page. Now already I'm moving out from an oral tradition into a written tradition, and within that I'm already inside. So, some people say they are very good with writing, yeah? Pen and all that. I had good handwriting once upon a time. But I'm very happy with the computer. I find that intuitive sense of the finger, doing its job, and you don't have to look at the QWERTY and you know where the keys are. It's brilliant. But your question on the e-book versus the tangible thing, of course I love the tangible thing. Who doesn't, yeah? Yeah, I am still old world, yeah? I like this thing being in a library. It needs to be there somewhere. When I'm dead and gone, somebody will see it and say, it's there, yeah? So I like the tangibleness of it, which is one reason why I resisted, frankly, the e-publishing thing for a long time. I waited long enough, for 20 years I waited, till Hemant, luckily enough, picked it up. And he's been fantastic. Hemant has been a champion of poetry, very courageous publisher. We never met before he published River Wedding. The first time we met was after the book was published. So I feel that that's how it should be. That, but there is also the other thing, which is that online is here. It's here to stay. It will be there. It has also opened immense possibilities of poetry. You don't have to do this cyclo-style notes all the time and, comparing I've read about clearinghouse poets in 70s in Bombay comparing each other's cyclostyle notes. Now it's online. There's a world out there, there's a vast ocean of poetry out there. There are small journals which can't survive with the written whatever, who are going online, who have got new design ways of doing it. I think we should embrace it. I don't see any other way out, frankly. It will have its own universe and own possibilities and contradictions. But as somebody who's, I feel I'm very lucky to be today writing poetry at this moment today. You know, last 3 years I've published poetry review, poetry foundation, rattle, this, that, whatever. These are all online stuff. They've also gone online. They have their kind of this thing also, but I haven't got my copy of poetry for the last 3 months. I've told them it's never arrived, the post-COVID, I don't know what's going on. It's okay, it's fine. But it really opens possibilities. The doors have opened.
But it's reaching out to a larger audience.
You must reach out. The larger audience also needs to. So it's either it's happening through spoken word, it's happening through online, and the life of poetry and the survival of poetry is not in the finally in the. It's in the small magazines. It's in the small presses. It's not in the big publishers of the world. They're not interested. There's no money in it. Yeah, we don't do it for the money or to get $1 million advance or whatnot.
It's also interesting because it brings up this question of local readership, right? Like having a community of local readers, as much as you have local publications that publish your poetry, like sort of building a local readership, which also makes me like I keep wondering, like when you're translating, for instance, are you like, how aware are you of, you know, like you're pretty much transcending the local readership and bringing it out, right? You're widening that that circle of readership, because even in Madras we have so many Tamil writers where, you know, like that my mother has read in magazines but I haven't, and then I have to wait for somebody to translate it and read it, and then that's a very small percentage, right? But this idea of a local readership and a local community that sort of follows your work, and then you're transcending out of that space. Like, what are the kind of, I don't know, the challenges that come with it? And it sort of connects even to what Amlan was saying, that the online has opened up a whole world. So there are too many parameters here where you're like, oh, now everybody is reading it. So how conscious should I be of my localness, as against when only local readers are reading it, you know?
Yeah, so when I first translated this novella, it was because I was reading it in Assamese, and it was during the time I was still a student in Delhi, and I wanted my friends to read this. I was like, okay, this is brilliant, and it's not translated, so they would never have access to this. So my translations, like my journey in translation began as a little bit of housekeeping, you know, I just want to show off my house outside. So, but yes, when you're translating, of course, you are trying to make it as current and as English as possible. But I think we need to retain certain elements which make it feel like it's a translation, because there are certain phrases and words, perhaps, where you can never find the equivalent for it. And I think it's just about transferring those empty spaces in between, you know. I think we're not just translating word meaning into another language, but it's a transfer of culture. It's a cultural transfer. And sometimes, you know, I think it works both ways with translation. Sometimes I think that something that is so rooted in the local, if it is like gone elsewhere, someone is sampling it elsewhere, will it still have the aroma of harvest or of history that it is moored to? But then again, I believe also translation gives you power sometimes to tap into resources which are only implicit in the original. Sometimes certain things shine more in the translation. So yeah, so sometimes, yes, when I'm translating, I'm always thinking never about the local readership because they have access to it in the original language, but I'm thinking of the person who through this would perhaps get to know a little bit of Assam or Assamese literature.
And therefore, are you way more conscious of the localness?
Yes, I guess in a way I am. When I say that I don't really care about the local readership, I guess I am very aware of the fact that I am sort of transcending this and making it for somebody else in another language.
Yes, I would love for you to please read that.
Hello. Speaking of translation, This poem is moving out of autobiography into kind of local flavor, folklore, translation. There's some urban stuff also in it, which is in the back of my mind, I guess, when I wrote it. Changing habitat. Let's not bring all that here. This is called Bus Routes of Childhood. Maskhua, fish eater. Digholi Pukhuri, long pond. Not hill pukhuri, stone pond. Or Jur Pukhuri, twin ponds. Nakkata Pukhuri, chopped nose pond. Ambari, mango garden. Bhorlo Mukh, mouth of river. Sharab booze joint. Adabari, ginger garden. Near Jalukbari, pepper garden. Jorabad, stitching ways to the hills where the air turns cold. Tini alley, 3 alleys. Sari alley, 4 alleys. Bijoynagar, victory city, swamped by the flood. Baruwari, 12 come together for a cause. Panbajar, betel leaf bazaar, books housed in childhood. Atgaon, 8 villages, can't find any. Puroni Gudam, old godown, near Ma's place. Polakbari, garden of Polak flowers, dad's place. Khotiamari, where the deer was killed. Hantipur, place of peace, near a hospital, a football field. Nagaon, 9 villages where Ma comes from. Bus routes of childhood, no place to sit, standing room only. On the ledge, breeze on hair. Traveling tomorrow with yesterday's eyes. Crossing fairy tales along the way, but never knowing, not paying a penny. The bus stops at odd, dusty places, looking for memories. No passenger in sight. Come one, come all, the conductor screams. There are no mango gardens, victory cities, villages left. They were gone when I came. Ways no longer knit on their own. The old ponds remain. Feelings dip. Mirrors face the past, carrying sirens at midnight. Once upon a time, there was no city. There were only dreams, gardens, a flower market. And you still ask me, why do I like it so much?
So now when I listen to you, I did not pronounce any of these words like this when I was reading it. So it was all my pronunciations, right? And that for me is also an interesting aspect of writing, is that I can say the Tamil words the way it's supposed to be said, but I know the person reading is not going to get it, right? Like the famous Rura of Tamil. I can say Tiruvira, and then you won't read it like that. You'll read it as Tiruvija, right? Because it has the Z, H, and A. So this rhythm of the words and the rhythm of the language, I think, is so intrinsic to writing itself, because it's also intrinsic to poetry, right? It is a kind of rhythm. We are creatures of rhythm, right? We breathe in rhythm, we walk in rhythm. So there is so much of that musicality, of language that I feel really comes to the fore only when I bring in the local flavor, right? Because I have those words there, and you read it a certain way, because it was the rhythm of your what colors your tongue, right? Whereas my rhythm will not be that. Like there was one bit which is it, right? That wouldn't have been how I read it. So it's interesting to see that I feel like the power of words itself in English really comes up, really shines, like you said, only when I have the local aspect embedded in it, right? So tell us a little bit about how did you so bravely put so many words?
See, it is also found in translation. So when you say that you are translating the same word in your own way from a Tamil tongue, and if I were reading Tamil, I would pronounce in a certain way. So again, see, if I celebrate mixture, miscegenate, I would celebrate mixing. So then I'm not looking for a particularly authentic way of pronouncing this. It's just that being from, my mother tongue is Assamese, so I can speak Assamese, and this is very natural to me. So it comes from a natural sense of whatever, not a purity sense of, oh, this has to be pronounced in that way. Now comes this question of how dare you, or rather, what gave you the courage to use so many words? I really wanted to write this poem. Yeah, I think Ra is smiling because what I was doing was that's how the conductor pronounces these stations. So this Adavari, 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 bus stand, huh? This is the conductor's rhythm, yeah? Jalukbari, 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 Adavari, Adavari. So this is how it is, and all of us who have kind of done bus trips on ledges and all of that. Now, is it allowed nowadays, or is it all closed? The bus is closed when you enter. It's allowed still, maybe.
It wasn't during COVID. Everyone is supposed to sit with one seat empty, but now it's back to normal. Everyone is hanging off, holding on to dear life.
I never sat on a bus, like inside in a seat. I mean, it's just, so maybe it was not the cool thing to do at that time. But the idea of this, so I feel that this poem does a couple of things. One is that it, absolutely, I love the fact that it uses place names. So, okay, let's read it in three different ways. One is there's a critique of city, urban, American streets are like all A123 and B123, and we are all going there. So there's that kind of disconnect with place, that kind of thing. It's all numbers and letters now. So whereas this is, you have places which are called Ginger Garden. You can't find the Ginger Garden anymore, but it's called Ginger Garden. No, it's called Mouth of River. It's called whatever. So, which I feel is a very organic sense of how we have looked at place. Bangalore will have similar places and so on, or any city. So, and our cities have grown organically. So, therefore, I find that this way of doing a very literal translation in this poem actually works. I don't want somebody to translate this into say that, this is what, some kind of critique's eye and say, I want to translate. Actually, they mean this. It's a very post-colonial problem. Huh? The critics saying, actually, you mean this. I want to go back to the original flavor. Yeah, why not? Yeah. So it works. So as far as these roots are concerned, I think I did a few. So I did as much as I could. But the mixing of the language is what is the fun in this. If it was only Assamese stuff, then it's again just limited. It's English there, it's Assamese there, there's some urban stuff going on. There is a bit of folklore also going on here. Yeah, because I'm also trying to, without exoticizing it, I'm trying to also bring some folklore into this. There's a sense of indigenous in this. Yeah. So, as far as courage to do so is concerned, I'll do more and more of this. There's no doubt. Yeah, I'll mix it up.
Hello. This is very reminiscent of, I would take train journeys from Vashi to VT in Bombay. And we come across like this whole plethora of we have Sandhurst Road railway station. And then you also have Chunabhatti and things like that. So you have a mix of languages. And then over time, even the pronunciations change. Like Sandhurst Road has become Sandas Road. The way you pronounce it over ages. So it was very reminiscent of that, the stations that I've crossed. And in terms of naming, Bangalore follows cross. So fourth cross, third main, that kind of a naming of places. So I think it says a lot about the place. The way a place is named says a lot about how people end up functioning around it. Address giving, wayfinding, all of that then becomes the larger thing that where we kind of navigate ourselves.
Yes, I would actually like to read this poem called Odiyan, which is a Malayalam word. So it's one of my favorites. I'm going to sit and read. You call me monkey man, Odiyan, shapeshifter. When I stalk the still night, deserted by shadows, everyone is imprisoned in their homes. You take photographs. I let you see me in my naked wisdom. I turn your myths around. The camera can see me too. Your wide angle, your narrow perspective, the side glance, doesn't matter. What matters is matter and how it thinks, how it changes shapes, becomes ape, how it walks on stilts, my legs lightning. You measure me metric, call me 8 feet, electric. You chase, I follow you in a karmic circle, where yesterday is today, but with another name. I count stars on lazy nights, not with fingers, but with toes, bending inward, breaking the chasms of distance. Yes, I change shape sometimes when I feel like it. In the rain, everything will be blurred again. Today's light post, tomorrow's shadow. I'm still alive, if that's what you want to know. Though living now is a different matter, filled with absence and uncertain wisdom. I fly on my feet to remind you it can be done. You are a little short of confidence, need a spring of hope. And though you're all inside, you must not forget who you are. What can you be? As for me, I am who I am. Pure matter that changes form. A spirit, free bird, aerial, peeping Tom. I'm not going to change, but into a bird, or who knows, the next wild thing that comes my way. My favorite. So why I actually picked on Odiyan is also because of the word Odiyan, right? And it immediately called out to me because it's a word I'm familiar with and we've heard stories, even though it's not part of Tamil culture, but it's, you still sort of hear resonance of it in our folklore as well. So immediately my attention went to Odiyan. And I also, I liked the intent of that poem as well, where you talk about shape shifting, where you talk about things changing form. And I feel that really that's what language does. Really, that's what local flavors do, because they sort of take you to the next step or take you to the next level of writing and reading, where I am consciously changing form. I am consciously saying man vasane and not, what's that word? What is, yeah, I'm not saying petrichor, I'm saying man vasane, because there is something in that word itself that is helping me imagine something else. It's helping me smell the wet earth, right? So that's one of the reasons why I really, really like this poem, is because I feel like that's what poetry is meant to do, writing is meant to do, language is meant to do, is that it changes form, it changes shape, and it helps me see the same thing in different forms. Like the same word can be different when Amlan's using it or when Ra's using it. Even though it's the same Assamese word, it can still hold a different space because of the way they use it. So that's why I like Odiyan.
So it has a otherworldly element to it, no? It's that other thing.
Odiyan is basically used to scare you. You know, Odiyan will come. It's like that. Like Puchandi will come. In Tamil, we say Puchandi. If you don't eat your food, Puchandi will come. It's like that.
Matter speaking back happened 2 years ago. Yeah, what was COVID but matter speaking back? Yeah, we thought it was, we were all separate and we were different, and matter spoke back to us in ways that we could, perhaps not comprehend initially. So this idea that we are separate and something else is, I think we are, yeah.
Yeah, I think also changing form adds a sense of wholeness, even though it separates you from the meaning, it still makes you one, because you are also contributing to its meaning now. You have become involved in what that word can mean. And I think there's a lot, I don't know how that works with translations, Ra, because I don't know how conscious actually you need to be, or maybe not need to be, of the word itself when you're translating, right? How conscious you need to be of the meanings you're giving it, because you are also interpreting it a certain way because of who you are, right? The same book, if somebody else translated it, wouldn't read the same, right? You are looking at it a certain way. It's a choice. Like I will still choose to say manvasane and not petrichor, in that sense. How conscious are you, or not, or you don't need to be?
I think you have to be to a certain degree. But I'm not too sure. I haven't really thought about this so much. When I encounter a word, I feel like, okay, this is the only meaning it gives me, and that is how I do it. So I guess, yeah, I mean, yeah, perhaps, yeah.
How conscious are you of words? You also, Pooja.
Oh, very conscious. Yeah, very conscious. I love 15 meanings out of the same word, punning all the time, yeah, all of that. Words are, you have to play with words. Yeah. They're playmates for you. Ra, do you want to read from Digoli Pukhuri?
Yeah.
We've got about 10 minutes, maybe open it up for Q&A
Okay.
after that, yeah?
Oh, just before Ra reads, I want to know how conscious you are of words. Words? Yeah, when you write.
So the first draft is completely, I don't even bother about what I'm putting down. It'll just come out. But it's when I edit, then I take a conscious weight of the word. Some words are too long. I feel like I try to recite it to myself sometimes to check, does it sound okay? Does it sound okay? And then I kind of edit the words and I put it down there.
Also the gap between words, silences.
The spaces.
The
pauses.
And the page, that A4 does allow you to do all that. You can do all kinds of possibilities. So this poetry is linked with visual forms, with design, with painting, with photography, with music. I think there are all kinds of possibilities. Anyway.
This is the first poem in the collection, and I guess it kind of ties with the thing that we were talking about a while ago, that the reader needs to come in and invest the poem with meaning, and then it is sort of a different affair altogether. So I think this poem has a lot of meaning to me, which perhaps may not be the same for other people as well. So maybe that is something I can ask him after I read the poem. So this is: a rain tree falls in Digholi Pukhuri. You heard evening birds, a pandemonium of whispers. Early mornings, a sad old man sleeping under it, dreaming hot May. Under the big rain tree lived a night forest. The strange woman uttered deep profanities. Do you know where fruits come from? Come here, I will make you breathe. The moon just did the stars. Always overdressed, her rags a mountain even in summer. Another rag added, the next time you saw her, leaves above, leaves under her feet. When the big tree fell, everyone came, children from long ago, after school. Saw ants crawl out, birds hatching, a snake slithering into the watery dark, where every tree became a story. So I know this tree that he's talking about. I saw it fell down. And so I connect with it on such a level. And that is exactly what I wanted to ask you. So this means something for me. And you said this, it's up to the reader. It can mean many different things to other people. So, but this poem is not just about that particular tree, right? It's not about Digholi Pukhuri. It is about the meanings that he has invested by using these words. And I think it will sort of, this personal element will translate into something universal, and other people will recognize other trees and other childhood streets and memories, perhaps. So is that right in sort of thinking like that?
Digholi Pukhuri is where I grew up, where you grew up too, in a different generation. So Digholi Pukhuri for me is a beautiful, haunting feeling. So this feeling of danger and haunting and otherworldly and all kinds of things, the lake would claim a life every year, yeah, all of that, with the sheer immense beauty of it all. I think that runs through everything. But I think, yes, that's the aim. If everything was about, so I absolutely believe that once you write so that people can identify their own elements with a piece of work. So in this case, a poem. So a poem, something, as I said, something should touch. And if this touches a reader in a different way, in some way, I think the job is, I'm not saying there's a job to do, but I'm saying that, yeah, that I think the poem has then taken wings, so to speak, yeah. Open up for questions, maybe two, three questions.
Okay. Okay, so, yeah? Okay. All right. So we can open it out for questions if anyone has any, and maybe take a few questions.
Hi. So a lot of authors have their creative process. So Stephen King has this whole process of, he belts out 1,000 words a day. Or if you think about Maya Angelou, she shuts herself in throughout the morning and just kind of delivers her output. What would be your creative process? Or in poetry, can you afford having that sort of a routine, given the kind of discipline that it is, or the kind of writing that it is?
It's a question from somebody who knows half the answer, because I deal with her on an everyday basis after 11 a.m. So the long answer to the short answer is yes, it is practice. So if you think that inspiration will strike like a thunderbolt, and then you'll wait for it to arrive, and that perfect poem or that perfect piece of work will come like Newton's apple. Maybe for Newton it might, but I'm sure Newton also had to go through a lot for that apple to fall and for him to have that insight. So the short answer is absolutely, it is practice like anything else. Now the second question is, how do you work your day around it? From long practice, I think I've realized that I don't write well later in the day. So if anything happens, it will happen between 5:30 in the morning to 7:30. That's the best time for me. So it won't certainly, I mean, I won't be able to write a good poetic piece in the afternoon or in the evening. But I honestly believe that it's important, absolutely essential for even my art practice, poetic practice, to be completely invested in worlds outside poetry for a better half of the day. If I don't do that, then I think I will rot as a poet. So the answer is that yes, I think that it is practice. It is a difficult thing to do because it means that you have to get up in the morning and think that you'll be able to write a poem, which it's not the most usual mornings. But if you're lucky, you end up writing a poem. So you have to be grateful for it. I am very grateful. I think this book itself, I'm very, very grateful for this book. It's a sense of personal fulfillment around it. But it is practice and it is hard work. I mean, yeah, it is hard work, yeah. It's lovely good. It's a difficult pleasure, let's put it that way. Yeah, without the pleasure, it's no point working hard. Yeah? It has the hard work, the pleasure. Philip Levine said this, an American poet I really admire. I got to reading him fairly late in life, but I really admire Philip Levine. And Philip Levine said that the best reward of writing a good poem is the writing of a good poem. So I think I completely, yeah.
Can I add to that, please? I just wanted to say that I have no routine. I feel like I write only in borrowed time because I'm a mother. So then if I get 20 minutes, I have to write in the 20 minutes. So there is no space to say, oh, I'll wait for the muse to come, or oh, when I'm in the zone, I'll write. There's no time for it. So you just learn to sort of navigate, you learn to navigate real life, actual practical life, and then you still write in between those spaces, right? And I know that I also feel like sometimes we idealize this idea of, Stephen King writes so many thousand words. I'm like, and I keep telling people Stephen King has a wife. He has, that's why he's able to do this. So you can't really compare, those kind of experiences with your own. So I think it's almost like you make your own routine, really. You figure out what works for you in your day and not worry about what anybody else is doing, and then just work around it. So there will be days when it's great and you will have the time and lots will come, and there'll be days when it's nothing, just 2 words literally will happen on the page, which you just have to make peace with it and say that that's how it is. Because also I think we are very conscious of the sense of time. Before this happens, I have to do this. Before I turn 40, book has to come. Before I turn 30, book has to be out. We are constantly putting so much unnecessary pressure on ourselves. It's not required. You write at your pace, your time, and when it needs to happen, it'll happen. That's pretty much it.
Can I also add to that? I've gone through a lot of self-loath due to forced writing. Like anything that happens because of this, even I function on similar terms. Like notes, put down tuck, something, and then you revisit it, like say 10 days later, 15 days later, and then you try to make, okay, you have some vana with you, and then you'll kind of try to shape it a little better. But on the days that I feel, oh, now I have the time, let me write, and then I revisit it and I feel disgusted with myself. So I mean, that happens. If you try to force yourself, at least for me, that's how it works. I hate the fact that I wrote. It is so pretentious. It will be like, why did you even do this kind of a business? So it's if it strikes, it's good. If it doesn't.
Yeah. And of course, you have like reality check every day. Like my daughter says, I wish you were never a writer. So I'm like, yeah, thanks. Sorry, what?
Like slam poetry.
Slam poetry. Oh, okay.
I think hip hop is very good poetry. Gully Boy is very good poetry.
Yeah, actually.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Actually, maybe Ra can. His PhD is on something similar.
Bob Dylan.
Yeah, he's writing on Bob Dylan.
So I think the thing that we spoke about a while earlier, I think we need to democratize poetry. It has to open up. And there is no distinction between high art and low art anymore. I mean, if you give Bob Dylan the Nobel Prize for literature, so definitely he has been writing poetry for all these years. So slam poetry, I think, should be seen as equal to anything else that may be printed and published in a book. So yeah, I always say this. I like using this football analogy when I talk about Bob Dylan winning the Nobel Prize. It's like in a Champions League game, they have scored an away goal. So that has, it's like an away goal for postmodernism, basically, where, we are opening it up. There is no difference there is no high art and low art. Art is art.
Yeah, I mean, we can remove the hierarchy, but appreciate the nuances.
Yeah.
So there are nuances in every style, form, and I think the more the merrier, I feel. Not block the gates and, all that.
Do we have any more questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
So an extension of the writing process question itself, I'd read somewhere that good artists put their work out there, whereas perfectionists hoard. And this is a direct comment on the process of editing itself. You write something and you want to go back because there's always that scope to make it better. And so when do you stop editing and be like, okay, fine, I think I need to move on? I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. And I'd like to hear from everybody on the panel.
It's a very good question. It's something everybody struggles with. But I think over time, I've just realized that there can never be a perfect story. There will always be flaws, yeah. I think it just reaches a point where I make peace with the fact that, okay, this story has these flaws. When I write the next one, I'll fix them. And then I know that the next one will have its own flaws. And then I say, okay, when I write the next one, I'll fix that. So I think every time you sort of learn to let it go with flaws, because life is not perfect, right? We have imperfect lives. We carry a lot of our own flaws. So even a story which is a reflection of life cannot be perfect. It will carry flaws. So I think you let go at the point where the story is, you stop writing when you know the story is done. You stop editing when you know that this is all you can fix. You know that there are some things you will have to let go. And that's really just comes from experience. Like you do this often enough and build the thick skin and say, okay, fine, let it go with these flaws. But yeah, that's how I function. So I don't know if anyone has.
I have a slightly different, I wait and wait. So I don't let it go. Though I agree with her on this wabi-sabi kind of idea of imperfection and the gaps and the creaks along the way and all that. But initially, I mean, whatever you write is great, but later you have to look at it from a very distinct, kind of dispassionate eye and realize some things are working, some things are not working. And kill your darlings, what do they call? Yeah, like that. So I don't like that kill your darlings though, but sometimes your first instinct line, which prompted the poem at the first place. Yeah, you're sentimental about it because a lovely poem came out of it and the poem took on a momentum of its own, which went beyond what you could cognitively, logically do, which is why poetry is different from prose. But you read it 3 months later, 6 months later, that first line didn't work. It just doesn't work and you have to knock it out. So these things happen and I wait a long, long time, but at the end of the day, you know when you know. Yeah, you know when you know. We have to
yeah. Okay, we'll do that now. Yeah, okay. Yeah, we'll open the magic packets, yes.
Okay, just last.
So before we actually go there, I would like you to close with, yes.
How much time do you have?
Can you give us 2 more minutes? Huh? Just to leave everyone with this idea of what poetry is, what poetry can do. Because Amlan wrote this really nice piece just a couple of days ago.
No, actually, I just contradicted myself. Now I said I'll wait for the longest time.
Yeah, now you're not waiting. That's because we are here. We didn't allow you to.
So I'm going to be like contradicting myself. I wrote a poem this morning. And Praveena thinks it's worth reading out. So I'm going to take a risk. It's an act of courage, I guess. This one is. Just give me a second. This is called For Those Who Ask the Purpose of a Poem. There are those who can make it rain from the tip of a magic hat And there are those who can make the earth quake from a distance. And still there are some who knock at your door, dreaming, and open all the windows while you are sleeping. And awake, cast the world in a different light. But I am not one of them. This gate needs a little push. Help me. And the mud on my shoes hasn't dried yet, my attention all splashy with last night's tears. The sky told the moon something about hiding in cloud. I can't tell you what it means. The bats prowling the fruit trees overheard it. The breeze is sighing an answer. And I like a poem for everything it can't do. It can't make breakfast for you or even take you to school. It has no high chairs and never gets a seat at the table. But she knows how to breathe and breathless finds an answer without searching for the question. There she is outside, looking at something others can't see. A poem can't help you cross the street, but she knows how to cross the ocean. Thank you. Once again, thank you so much. All nice, good things said about poetry, but my book is also merchandise, so my publisher likes it when stuff gets sold. So I think Vital Signs is available outside at a 20% discount, and enjoy, savor it, take your time in it. Yeah, and thank you so much for being here. I think we need to do some ribbon cutting right now. Yeah, ribbon unraveling.